Today we're talking Oscars, the slap, and how we should think about that biblically. This is Matt. I'm here with James, and this is Pastors on Pop. Well, James, it's good to be doing this podcast with you again.
Good to be back, my
Yeah,
friend.
we gotta do this a lot now.
Yeah.
And so, the whole world is talking about the Oscars and the slap. So I just thought we should add our commentary to this. We can't let this go by without at least talking about it. So let's just talk Oscars.
Yeah.
Do you remember? Have you ever watched the Oscars, or do you remember like the last time you watched the Oscars before this all happened?
I can't remember the last time we tuned in and actually watched it. Yeah.
Yeah.
The last time I was actually even interested in it was probably when the day after when I heard of what Ricky Gervais did the first time he hosted, and it was just
Where he roasted everybody.
oh my gosh. Yeah.
It was like a celebrity bloodbath
was
when Ricky Gervais did it.
fantastic.
And then they invited him back.
2 more times.
Right.
With rules that they wanted him to follow, and he told them at the beginning, like, I'll follow none of them. And the third time he walked out with a glass of whiskey. It was like, where's this gonna go?
They're like, he's finally crossed the line. This is over. This is over. So I remember the last time I watched the Oscars, I vividly can remember this. Now I love movies and storytelling and all that, so I kind of like pay attention to what new movies got nominated, best actor, actress, that, and who wins.
Yeah.
But I haven't watched it forever. And the reason is that when I was like in high school, or no, I was actually younger, when the Batman came out, so this is the 80s. I wasn't in high school. I was 9 years old, right? So remember when Michael Keaton's Batman came out?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
my parents took me to the movie and let me watch that when I was a kid. And I just thought it was like the coolest thing ever. Like, this is the best movie ever. And so I remember like thinking, like watching the Oscars and thinking the Batman is going to get, Michael Keaton is going to win. Like, this Batman's going to take everything. Hands down. And then they didn't win anything. And I was like, this is crap, man. They don't know anything about movies, right? And so that's when I watched the Oscars, and then I swore them off because they did not, Batman didn't win the way that I thought it should. And so that's the Oscars for me. Now, when The Gladiator came years later, they kind of redeemed themselves because they saw what I saw, But then a few years ago when they did, oh man, what was that Affleck movie, Casey Affleck, Manchester Under the Sea?
Oh yeah.
Right? Like, that was like the worst millennial movie ever. Like, at the
Yes.
end of it, it's like, where's the knife so I can like kill myself, right? It was just so depressing and so awful. And then it's
And they
like, that's
loved
the
it.
best picture. I
Yeah.
was like, oh my good. Like, we don't
Who are these people?
actually see eye to eye when it comes to movies. Yeah. So this year's Oscar, in case anybody who's listening isn't, like living under a rock or something, what made this year's Oscar memorable, or maybe infamous, is that the right word?
I think so.
So is the slap, right?
Yeah.
Where Will Smith walks up to Chris Rock after Chris makes a joke about Will's wife. And the funny thing in watching the video is like Will's like chuckling along like, ha 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 ha, Chris, you're so funny, you're so funny. And then like it flashes to Chris and then back to Will and Jada, his wife, and all of a sudden it was very clear that she had said something and it was not as funny as what it was. And so he walks up on the stage and everybody's like, what's going to happen? And then he just roundhouse slaps Chris right in the face. And like, it's like, is that staged?
Serious.
Like, what's
Yeah.
going on here? And then nobody came out. Nobody did anything.
That's
and,
assault.
yeah. And then he walks back and Will Smith just sort of like starts cursing at Chris.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's like,
that was intense.
This is getting out of like. So when you saw it for the first time, and you and I didn't watch the Oscars, so we were like, I was before you. I introduced you to it, but we were sitting in staff, and that was like the talk of our staff meeting that day. And so when you saw it for the first time, like, what went through your mind?
Yeah, I mean the a shock of, oh my gosh, did that really just happen?
Yeah.
But the first thought for me was just the reality of, for anybody with a platform, like there's good things that come with a platform and there's bad things, which honestly is part of what I loved. Like it made me think back to watching Ricky Gervais.
Yeah,
because what I loved about it was, like, even growing up watching the Oscars, it was always all these people with their peers and like applauding each other for being like masters of the universe.
right.
And then Ricky Gervais showed up and he was like, you're all spoiled brats, and I'm just gonna I'm just gonna rip on you individually, and like, so for me, the shock was everybody in the room is open game.
Yeah.
Open game. And the Smiths, I mean, they probably live a pretty darn good lifestyle because of the platform, but because of the platform comes a price tag.
Yeah.
Does it make sense? And I
particularly in that world, right? Like those award shows, the monologues have become a bit of a roasting.
Totally.
And it's whether it's right or not, it's acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a way of just acknowledging that the same machine that made you big will also probably eat you someday. Does it make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, which is why guys like you and I probably sleep pretty well at night.
That's true.
Because I mean, there's drama in our lives and stuff, but it's not on that scale. But either is our checking account.
Yeah, and it's not being broadcast to the world.
No, exactly.
My worst moments of life is not being broadcast to the world. Although I don't know that would ever cross my mind. When I first saw it, I was going to bed that night, and like I said, I kind of follow the Oscars even though I don't watch it, and so I opened up the news, and everything was about Will Smith, slapping Chris Rock, and I was like, man, what in the world? Like, what happened? And so I go and I watched the video, and then I watched it again, and then I had to watch it a third time. I'm like, what in the world is like this? And I'm just like, I was totally like, I don't know what I was thinking. I was just like just the shock of this. Like, our culture has reached this point where you can openly assault somebody on a stage and nobody does anything. And then he goes back, like I said, and is cursing at The Rock and at Chris Rock and all this kind of stuff that happening down. And then, the next video that I watched was Will Smith's acceptance speech. And so they get up and they read, Best Actor goes to Will Smith for King Richard. And the whole place stands and applauds. And I'm like, what in the world?
Yeah. What are they standing for?
Yeah, what did we, like, and I was just trying to think, like, in that moment, like, if I was in the room, what do you do? Like, here's a pretty amazing accomplishment. I think that was his first ever Best Actor award.
Oh.
Did he? Maybe he won one for The Pursuit of Happiness, but anyways,
Legend was amazing.
Yeah, that's right. Another movie that didn't get the Oscar that it deserved. So that movie came out in 2007. Probably Will Smith's best, particularly in light of the pandemic. I showed everybody. I was like, look, you want to know where this is going? You just have to watch I Am Legend.
Oh my gosh.
And so so I was just like trying to put myself in the room and be like, if like, here's a guy who's reached kind of the pinnacle of his career. Like, this is like, you have just been noted as the best.
Yes. Yeah.
And yet what you did 20 minutes prior has like this so full of conflict and tension. And I was just like, this is, oh my goodness, this is I don't even know what to think about. This is unbelievable.
Exactly.
Hey, my name is Matt Manning, and I am the senior pastor here at Crossroads Church, and hopefully you are loving what you're listening to today. If you are, we would love for you to go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. You can leave us a comment. We read all of them. And if you like it, we'd love for you to share this with a friend. Every week we get together as a church to celebrate what God is doing, and you can join us every Sunday at 8:30, 10, and 11:30 online or in-house. Let's get back to the podcast.
And so watching that acceptance speech, I wrote down some of it because the whole situation, like, that was already bizarre, like, only turns more bizarre when he gets called up, right? The applause comes, and he gets the Best Actor award, and he gets the Best Actor award for a movie that's focusing on the story of him being a father for the celebrities, right? Serena and Venus. And in his acceptance speech, he then tries to like justify what just happened in using Richard, Venus and Serena's dad. And he says, Richard Williams was a fierce defender of his family. And it's like, is he justifying what he...
Yeah, exactly.
And then I was like, I wonder what Richard thinks about this.
Keep me out of it. right? Yeah.
Don't pull my name into this. And he goes on and he says, in this time in my life, in this moment, I'm overwhelmed by what God is calling on me to do and be in this world. And so it was almost like in that moment, he goes from trying to justify it to then saying, I know what God's calling me to do. Now, obviously, Will Smith like paints himself into this terrible corner, right?
Yeah.
And so like as you're listening to just the beginning, because we'll get to the next part that he says in a minute, but as you kind of looked over like what he said, what was your reaction to what he was saying when he first got up to accept the award?
Yeah, because he stood up there and said, was it protect? Was that the word he used?
Defend, yeah.
Defend.
Fierce defender.
Fierce defender.
Fierce defender.
And it was, for me, it was like, so you're just gonna go slap happy, like on everyone and everything that stands, against you. It's like, man, that's a pretty toxic individual.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that like it seemed like he was just justifying what just happened and using Richard Williams as a reason for that. But yeah, I mean, it was shocking. And the other side shocking thing was, I don't know if you caught it, but he looked over at Denzel Washington.
Oh, right.
Because somehow in the middle of it, and Denzel, I think, is a pretty solid Christian.
Yeah.
And he talked to him somehow and said, be careful, because the devil comes for you when you're at your highest place. And he was up there, and he was saying that, and he looked over at Denzel, and he repeated what he told him offline.
Yeah.
And it was like this kind of like, you have the mic and you have the attention. The Academy's like not looking at the clock right now.
Yeah.
So, but be careful.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the justifying it, and then when he switched gears, truthfully, it confused me, and it still kind of confused me.
Yeah. That's such a good point about his moment with Denzel. And I've thought about that a lot in movies past, like with The Passion and Mel Gibson, right? Like Mel Gibson makes, still to this day, probably the best depiction of Jesus's life that we've seen in the theaters. And it was acclaimed, just big, made a lot of money.
Yeah.
He did it seemingly for all of the right reasons. He wanted to tell his faith story and the importance of Jesus, and then just some of the images of the Passion, right? Like after Jesus is crucified and as the teardrop of rain fall, right? Like there's just so much beautiful imagery. Yeah. The way that he depicted Satan and speaking to Jesus, like all of it just so beautifully.
Almost as good as Legend.
Almost as good as Legend, that's right. A little bit better than Braveheart. And then, like a year later, Mel Gibson's life spirals out of control, right? And the woman that he's been married to and has all his kids with, he leaves for a model. He gets pulled over and blames the Jews for all of the world's problems. And, and then it's like in his moment of highest, right?
Yes.
That's when Satan came from him. And that's a really good point. I didn't think about that. Yeah. As soon as I heard his comments and him move from the justification to what God was calling him to be, it really piqued my interest.
Yeah.
And then what he said next was actually where I want to kind of lead us for the rest of our time, is that Will Smith interpreted what God was calling him like. So he says that, right, in this moment, I'm overwhelmed by what God is calling on me to do and to be in this world. And then his very next line was, I know to do what we do, you got to be able to take abuse. And you got to be able to have people talk crazy about you. In this business, you got to be able to have people disrespecting you, and you got to smile, and you got to pretend that that's okay. And as I listened to that, knowing that Will Smith has some Judeo-Christian background, and as I heard that, what I thought immediately, and this is pure speculation, but immediately what I thought of is Jesus' words in Luke chapter 6, the Sermon on the Mount, the famous. And it was so apt. Like I would be surprised if this wasn't what he was thinking about, because Jesus' words are, when someone comes up and slaps you, turn the other cheek, you know, in this. And so Jesus' specific words in Luke chapter 6 is this, but I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. To one who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from one who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. Give to everyone who begs from you, and from the one who takes away your goods, do not demand them back. And as you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. And so Will Smith is justifying, then he moves to this is what God calls me to do, and then he makes this statement that what God basically is calling me to do is that when people disrespect you, you got to smile and pretend like it's okay. And as I heard that, I just thought, man, is that what Jesus is calling us to be and to do?
Yeah.
And so when an enemy comes, when you're slapped in the face, when someone's disrespecting you, like, is Jesus just calling you to roll over and pretend like everything's okay? And so I just thought that I would bring that up and hear some of your thoughts in terms of how that works.
Yeah, and I think just becoming a punching bag for the world, it wasn't Jesus's intention, right? Because I think the turning the other cheek is really seeing beyond what, like, the action, and actually having empathy, and entering doing something of compassion even to meet that person there. And it's so counterintuitive, right? I mean, because I think our sin nature is actually, I mean, I've always equated it to kind of like how animals live, right? I mean, like if you rile up a dog enough, they'll bite you.
Yeah.
Like it's going to happen. I mean, even a docile dog like mine, like, I can get him pretty fired up to where the teeth come out, right? But what God's calling us to is to be empathetic to the brokenness, or maybe even the motive of the person that's coming at us, right? So
Absolutely.
So like in everyday life, it's super easy for me to, have someone in a Audi, cut me off. No offense if you drive an Audi, but it's usually an Audi that does it to me. I don't know why.
Just watch that.
Even saying that, right? It's just like, and
the judgment has been cast.
I know, and for me to just assume that they're a pretentious individual.
Yeah.
Instead of, and like, I'll have a friend in the car, and they'll say, well, maybe they got a call from the school and their kid's arm is broken. I'm like, his arm ain't broken.
That's right. As I've kind of like thought through this, and particularly in light of like Jesus's words, like, I think I agree with you completely that in this fallen world, that God is calling us, Jesus specifically in this moment is calling us to a lifestyle of compassion and benevolence. That we are never more, like, in this moment, we are never more like God than if in that moment we're able to show the compassion, benevolence, love. And when I say love, I'm not talking like the rainbow and kitten kind of love, but what the Bible calls agape, where we choose to treat people with the dignity that God has created them with.
Yeah.
In that. And I've just been thinking a lot about it. Like, if I was in that situation, like, how would I handle, like what is Jesus asking us? How is he asking us to handle that practically?
Yes.
Is it just to smile and pretend it's okay? No. Is it to get up and to fiercely defend? There's probably moments biblically that we could say. I'm not thinking that was one of them.
Yeah.
And I think as I've thought through it, is like, in that moment, if Will Smith had got up like he did, walked up to the stage, grabbed the mic from Chris Rock and said, like, hey man, you and I were buds. And I don't know if you know this or not, but Jada's got a disease that causes her to not have hair. And your jokes, they're feeling pretty disrespectful right now. And I'm just going to ask that you respect me as your friend.
Yeah.
And I'm going to choose to trust you in this moment, that you'll just respect my family. And here's the mic back, man. Keep continuing on the Oscars. Denzel's sitting right there. Take a shot at him. Whatever it is, right?
Yeah,
and I think, like, in that moment, like, the whole world would have seen Will in this. This is what God's calling him to do, right?
Yes.
And to meet Chris with compassion, like, he wins the world.
Yeah.
And he wins his wife.
Yeah.
Like, that is fierce defense.
Yeah.
Not just going up and slapping him and showing, some kind of toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
But to go up and to show compassion, and then to call the guy up, not just to put the guy down, but to actually call him up into something better.
Yeah.
Man, I just look at that and it's like, that's what Jesus is calling us to.
Yes. And absolutely. I mean, it would have been interesting to see if that would have gotten as much press the next day, because it is something that's countercultural that media doesn't make money off of, right?
Yeah.
But it takes such forethought. I mean, I think that's the hard thing, is you get in those situations, and and I mean, as a pastor, right? And everybody's always looking for hypocrisy. Right? It's like matter of fact, they're almost excited when they see it. Does that make sense?
As if we're perfect people.
Yeah, like our testimony that Jesus saves sinners.
Yeah.
Like, it's on the shirt, man. Right? But but the ability to pause in that moment and think in a critical way like that. Like I watched an interview over the weekend with one of my heroes is Bob Iger from Disney.
Yeah.
I think he'll be leaving Disney probably in the next couple of weeks. But
the podcast we did a month ago isn't aging very well.
Yes, but
skip number 6.
But I've seen him in interviews, like with guys like Jon Stewart that are just trying to poke the bear.
Yeah.
And I watch him. He smiles, and he collects himself, and he redirects the question where he wants it to go. And he is so graceful, and it's mastery. And as a guy that, I mean, I rarely regret what I didn't say, right? Like, it's usually what I say. Yeah. I mean, fortunately, I don't slap people very often.
Yeah.
But man, I can do a lot of damage with my tongue.
Yeah.
You know, and seeing a guy that has that harnessed in a I mean, gosh, it gave me goosebumps to hear you talk about what if he would have done this. It was like, that would have been a showstopper.
Yeah. Yeah. There would have been a different kind of quiet in the audience.
Oh my gosh.
Like at the award acceptance speech, if that had happened, it wouldn't have been an applause for job well done in this movie.
Yeah.
It would have been reverence.
Absolutely.
Towards the way that Will handled that.
Be our president.
That's right. I think that when it comes to like worldview, and particularly as you and I are believers, that it's so important for us to think through the theology that we have and practically how it works itself out in our lives. Because there's going to be moments when, as Jesus says, an enemy comes, right?
Yeah.
And someone says a harsh word to you, and someone, slaps you, or someone takes something that is truly yours, and now there's loss in this. And to think through, how would I handle that situation? Because when that arises in the moment of fire, you're not going to choose right. You're going to choose your animal instinct, right? You're going to fight, or you're going to run, or whatever it is. But to go, man, in a moment of turmoil, in a moment of tension, when somebody is against me, when the hair on my back is rising up, if I can just pause for a moment and think through what it is that I've actually been called to, and then respond out of compassion and benevolence and love, then the world changes.
Yeah.
And it's what the world, I think, longs to see, in a world that's so full of Twitter wars and now slapping on a stage. Like we long for anybody with some decency that goes, how do we handle conflict differently?
Yeah, and is that a momentary ability, or is that like a pre-decided thing? Like there's this a random scene in a Band of Brothers that I love, where a replacement comes in and he's just scared. I mean, he's in the trenches and he's just scared to death, and this other guy is just cold as ice, and there's bullets flying everywhere, and he basically says, you're scared because you don't realize that you're already dead. Oh, like right. For this
that line, yeah.
So, and it's such a brilliant picture where like this soldier, he's still very much alive, but he has no expectation of going home, because, and as a Christian, like it resonated with me in that moment. Like, gosh, is there something in that of how I need to live my life, of realizing that I died? Yeah. And that now God is living through me in a different. So when the offense comes my way, or the bullets in that situation, it's like they can't really kill a dead guy. Does it make sense?
Right. I think you're absolutely right. I think that when it comes to this, that the response oftentimes is because we've thought through it before.
Okay.
We've contemplated. So an example I often use is with suffering. We're all going to face suffering in this world. And if we don't have a good theology of suffering, if we haven't thought through what suffering is going to be like, when we get there, one of two things is going to happen for us as a believer. Either we're going to run toward God, right, and embrace him in the pain, or we're going to give him the double middle finger, right, and walk away.
Yeah.
And how we've thought through suffering and what we believe suffering to be and what we believe this life to be will speak to everything that we encounter when it comes to suffering and how we respond in suffering. I think it's the same thing here, that we know that people are going to be against us, that there's going to be moments where the enemy stands before us, whether that be someone taking a shot at us in a newspaper, or, as happened on Instagram the other week when we posted a reel and the first comment was that I'm poison, right? Like there's gonna be people that stand against you, and to determine in your heart already, what is my response?
Yeah.
My response is not to answer on Instagram the way I want to. Though the response is to go, how do I show this guy compassion and benevolence and love, even though he's coming against me? And like I said earlier, I think that wins the world.
Yeah. Good words, man.
Well, thanks for joining today. We'll do this again in a couple of weeks, me and you. And we're going to be after Easter, we're going to be in a sermon series called Shifting Gears, where we're looking at the way that we relate to God in different ways. And it's going to be exciting. So the next time we get together, will actually be me and Todd, a special guest. And then after that, you and I will break down what it means to have these gears in our lives and how it all works out. So I'm excited for that and the next month of podcast. Thanks for joining us today. If you have any questions or comments, you can certainly leave them right there on YouTube, or you can find this podcast wherever podcasts are found. If you want more information about Crossroads Church, you can go to crossroadsabc.com. That's our website. All of our information is there. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time.